And we decided we had to turn that into a treatment clinic. And we built a little sala, temporary sala for a waiting area with a couple of benches for people to sit in and wait out in the shade or out of the rain. And that's where we then had to shift to medicine, and people would come and go there, and no longer were staying underneath our house. And that was what we had to work with the first 2 years. And we set up a dispensary with a pharmacy and one half of that storage shed. I hired 2 people, besides the help of Winnie regularly, one whose name was Sudha, who was very valuable because she was Thai educated and literate in Thai, but she was a local Po Karen and fluent in her native language, and she was able to communicate. And then the other I hired was a man called Surin, who was a high school graduate, young man, who was bright, and I trained him to start doing many things. First, doing the laboratory work, blood work, and looking for malaria parasites and all the other things we tried to do. And eventually, we had a little X-ray, and I trained him to do that. In fact, he did my operative anesthesia, managed the anesthesia machine after we used open rock ether to do the induction.
Sudha was Karen.
She was Karen.
Surin was Mon.
He was Mon. He had the Mon language. He was also fluent in Thai.
Yeah.
And so, as you know, you and I spent a considerable amount of time. I had spent 2 years learning the Thai language, but you were never through using interpreters where we worked, because we had the Mon language, we had the Karen language, we had 2 dialects of Karen, we had Burmese language that many of them had to use. And so we were always using a translator. Right. And in fact, after a while, we began to get some Chinese too. We were never done working with languages, but it's still true that most of the time, the Thai language that you and I had was the key to our ability to communicate.
Right. So we would speak in Thai, and then our translator would translate to Mon or Burmese or Po Karen or Skok Karen or whatever the patient was comfortable in. So you were seeing patients in this storage shed, and they were waiting in the sala. Mm-hmm. Meantime, the hospital building was going up. Is that correct?
There were plans. There was an architect missionary who was part of the Presbyterian mission. His name was Taylor Potter. Mm-hmm. The plans we had for the 2 houses were drawn up by him. That's how they were able to get the materials together.
So now we have American Baptists and Disciples and Presbyterians all working together.
And one of the refreshing things about, as you know, working in Thailand is that we were working under the auspices and as the co-workers of the Church of Christ in Thailand. And we could forget our labels, which is really not important in most of our mind, and work together and plan together. And so we had help from people like this, Taylor Potter, who was delighted to help. And we had plans. We already had some materials, and we were determined as quickly as we can to start building not only not only the first hospital, but also a boarding school building for students that were staying there and studying in the local school. And also we had co-workers, and we needed a new residence for them. And so those buildings all got underway quickly between 61 when we were there and 62 in the summer of 62 when we left on furlough. And so we selected a site which is maybe 200 or 300 yards away from the homes where we located the hospital, and we have pictures showing they're building these large cement, what would you call those, supports for the roof before we put up the siding of the hospital. And one of the unusual things that you and I talked about was we had an American Baptist missionary, Chet Galaska, who knew about a device that he had, which there was a material that was everywhere, underfoot everywhere, which is the residual soil of a rainforest at least in that area, which they call laterite. And if you dig that out, it's heavy clay with small gravel pieces, and you could bring that out, moisten it up, and there was a formula where you put a percentage of cement with a laterite and put this in this little machine, and you press out a block that we use for the construction of the hospital walls.
Yeah, I saw some pictures of that machine, and as I recall, the amount of compression that was required to make these blocks hang together required a terrific amount of leverage on the part of the people operating the device. Yeah, all manual. Seems like I saw two people hanging on the lever, which was very long. But those blocks, you tested, right?
Yeah, we were saying, what do you mean? The rain's going to come, and when during the rainy season we have water beating down on these walls, and these blocks are just going to melt away. Well, with the new cement, and then we carefully sun-dried them. We took 2 or 3 down and put them in the river and watched them carefully. And they sat there and didn't dissolve at all for a number of weeks until we were reassured. Anyway, the decision was to use this material. We made hundreds of these blocks, and all of the walls, clear up to the fancy roof that was built by Taylor Potter, was filled by this, and we left openings in which we carefully put Thai-made louvered glass windows that you and I lived with for a number of years. And that was the fundamental materials that we did for the hospital.
So by making the bricks locally, you saved a huge amount of money, not only in the purchase of the blocks in the big city, but also in transportation of the blocks. That's because you made them right there on site.
And of course by the time we were getting busier and busier, and by the time we were in 62, we were desperate to get over to that new hospital building. Had a roof on it. Those walls hadn't been going up yet. But we were beginning to have clinics over there. We had set up our pharmacy and dispensary and a system, and so we were doing outpatient medicine in that shell of a building as it was being completed quite a lot before we actually moved into the building and formally started going in the hospital.
I understand there was one particular patient you cared for, a very influential man in the community, and your good influence with him, or his good influence with you, served you well later on.
Oh yes, you're thinking of the who became a nationally famous abbot of the Buddhist temple. He was a Mon, and the Mon was probably as large a population in Sankla village area as there were Karen, and certainly not many more than the Thai from down country. And they were a strong Buddhist community, and the abbot, who became nationally known as Luang Pa Uttaba, was a young man then, and my co-worker Surin was a Mon, and so they knew each other well. This was after we were established, and we had an X-ray unit and a lab going. Came over with a history of coughing up blood, and said he would like me to examine him, and an X-ray and lab tests proved that he had a small open primary tuberculous lesion. And we started him on therapy for a whole year, and my assistant, Surin, dutifully went across the river, substantial walk, regularly to give him his streptomycin shot. He was taking ionation. He had a full recovery. Excuse me. But that was a significant relationship we established. He as a patient, and he actually walked over, and his attitude was, we don't need had been asked, do you think we need another medical work here by others of the Thai government? He said, we have our doctor, we have our hospital, we don't need that. Later on, that still did happen, but he was quite loyal, and because of that friendship, there was one time when my assistant Surin, we had a new police chief in town who decided he might get a little extra bribe money from me if he jailed my assistant, who was many small business people would take materials from Burma and sell it on. There are many things coming from Burma smuggled across the border all the time that were being sold in the village by many little shops. Well, Surin was arrested on the basis of having some of that. His wife was selling a few things. And when I got back from a trip and found him in jail, I went over and talked across the river, talked to the Otamat. I said, "We've got a problem. Our friend Surin has been put in jail, and I need your help." He said, "Don't worry about it." And the next day he was out of jail, and a couple of weeks later that police chief was gone from the town. So, and then we heard in the word in the clinic around the village was, just don't mess around with, we don't mess around with the Utamat. We don't mess around with the doctor because he's a friend of the Utamat. So those are all issues that gave me reassurance that we had local safety, and I felt comfortable traveling around in the villages. Much of my early medical work centered around doing a lot of home calls, because I didn't just sit in the clinic waiting. I would hear of somebody who was quite sick in one of the villages nearby. Usually it's right in the immediate area. I wasn't able to travel a whole lot upriver because it was just impossible to travel. So people would come down who were upriver and to the Sangklabri area. But if there was somebody in the Mon village or somebody across in the main Sangkla village, I would go over there and do house calls. And I have one picture I'll try to find that shows me coming back from a house call with my doctor bag in one hand and a big fish in the other, which I'd been paid for that house call. We commonly, our economics were to, because it was a barter system, certainly no checks and other ways to pay bills, and we took payment in rice. Did you still do that during the period you were there?
We did once, and once was enough.